Okay, techniques for dividing by 2. Okay, we want to divide even numbers. 8 is an even number, so it becomes a 4. 3 is not an even number, so we'll borrow 1 from it. It becomes an even number 2. The 1 goes back here to the 8, and the 8 becomes an 18. 2 is even, so we can take half of that, which is 1. 18 is even, we can take half of that, which is 9. Now, 9 is not an even number, so we're going to borrow 1 from it. It becomes an 8. The 1 we borrow goes back to the 3, so it becomes a 13. 13 is not even, so we'll borrow 1 from that. It becomes 12. And the 1 we borrow goes back to the 6. It becomes a 16. So now we have all even numbers. Half of 8 is 4. Half of 12 is 6. Half of 16 is 8. Okay, 7 is not an even number, so we're going to borrow 1 from it. So 7 becomes a 6. The 1 goes back here to the 7, and the 7 becomes a 17. 17 is not even, so we'll borrow 1 from that. It becomes a 16, and the 1 goes here to the 1 back here, so the 1 becomes 11. 11 is not even, so we borrow 1 from there. It becomes 10, and the 4 becomes a 14. Now, half of 6 is 3. Half of 16 is 8. Half of 10 is 5. Half of 14 is 7. Okay, we'll try to take half of 9. 9 is not an even number, so we'll borrow 1 from it. It becomes an 8. And the 1 that we borrow goes back here to the 7, so the 7 becomes a 17. 17 is not even, so we'll borrow 1 from that. It becomes a 16. And the 1 comes over here to the 1. The 1 becomes 11. 11 is not even, so we borrow 1 from it. It becomes 10. And this 0 becomes a 10. Now, half of 8 is 4. Half of 16 is 8. Half of 10 is 5. And half of this 10 is 5. Okay. Now, half of 6 is 3. 5 is even, so we'll have to borrow from it. So 5 becomes a 4. The 1 is borrowed over here, but there's no number here, so we're going to add a decimal and a 0, so that when we put a 1 here, we use the 0 to become a 10. So now, half of 4 is 2, the decimal, and half of 10 is 5. Okay. Half of 9, we have to borrow, so this becomes an 8, and the 1 that we borrow turns the 2 into a 12. The 5, we cannot take half of that, so we'll borrow 1 from it, and it will become a 4, and we'll have to add a decimal and a 0, and now this becomes a 10. Now let's take half of 8, we get 4, half of 12 is 6, half of 4 is 2, the decimal, half of 10 is 5. Okay, now let's take half of 3, we can't, because we need to borrow 1 from it. It becomes a 2, and 1 goes here to the 4, it becomes a 14. We can't take half of 5, so it becomes a 4, and add a decimal and a 0, so the 1 borrowed becomes a 10. So now let's take half of 2, we get 1. Half of 14, we get 7. Half of 4, we get 2, the decimal. And half of 10, we get 5.